Hi, everybody. Hi, Gary. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. The wind's blowing heavy outside, but I'm in a nice, cozy house.
Yeah, we've got two storms hitting us in the UK, haven't we? Although for some reason they name them in alphabetical order, don't they? The storms, and for some reason we've got the one beginning with F hitting us before the one beginning with E. So how that works, I don't know. How are you, mate? Are you good? I read your book recently on holiday, A Life Without
Thank you.
Fear. It was recommended to me by a friend of mine, and I thought I read it while I was on holiday, and
Wow.
I thought I've got to get you on and talk about your book and talk about depression and rates of depression, because obviously we've hit a lockdown here in the UK and rates of depression have gone off the scale. But first things first, I want to ask you a question. What's the hardest thing you've ever done, mate?
Ah, swim away and let my kids to drown.
That was in your book, and when I read it, I thought, no, this is rubbish. But this is something that you used to ask people when you interviewed them, didn't you? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I figured that, people go off. I'd interviewed managers and everything really, and then found that they were great at interviewing, but rubbish at managing because they'd gone off and got trained,
Yeah.
in the process of being interviewed. So I like to disrupt things. I like to do things a bit different, be a bit provocative. And that's one of the methods I came up with. The other was the truth drug. Of course, we couldn't do that anymore. I'd take them out the night before, get them blind drunk on vodka, and they'd think I'd be drinking the same, but I'd be on water. So
Yeah.
that would put them at a disadvantage the next day. But of course, those things are days in the past, man. But this question, yeah, was deliberately designed to disrupt the thinking, and get to the root of who the people really are.
So you swam around away from your kids and left them to drown, I think is what you said in the book. Is this explain why you wrote about that in the book and why it's because obviously this is something that I can imagine caused you some mental health problems down the road.
Yes and no, really. And I guess I would talk in the book, really, anybody that's facing really bad adverse times, it isn't until later in time you realize how important they were in your life. Even the
Yeah.
most distasteful of things, like I used to foster children in Telford, for instance, some terrible, terrible things that people experience. But with the right encouragement, they go on to be your strengths in the future. It really doesn't feel like it at the time.
Yeah.
But the drowning process, perhaps I'll leave it for people to read the book about what the outcome actually was.
Yeah, please do. Let's
But
not
it
give it away.
became an important part in my life. And I think, the relationships I had with people after that would not have been anywhere near the same unless I'd experienced that, quite traumatic
If you
experience. Yeah.
were if you were interviewing me at the time and you asked me that question, I would have snapped back. Oh, I cleaned my friend's brains and skull off the bedroom curtain after he shot himself. How about you? That would be the way I responded to it. Now, depression is PTSD I was suffering from, and depression as a result of my friend killing himself when he was in America. But I mean, let's obviously the reason I wanted to get you on and talk to you at the moment is because we're in the middle of COVID. We're in COVID times, and this is not being great for people with depression, is it? Can you explain how people with depression are going to be feeling, how things are going to be much worse for them right now than they were, for instance, last year?
I guess one of the things that, people from the outside, if you're not suffering from depression or haven't, to the degree that, that can quite often end in suicide, it just doesn't seem rational, but it's actually the complete opposite. And the situation of lockdown will enhance that.
Mm-hmm.
Having time on your hands to think things over is the worst for anxious or depressed people. It's the worst case you can think of. Being busy and occupied, even in survival situations, helps. It's when we have time to sit, think, watch the news. Because really, certainly depression, more so than anxiety in a way, it's a left brain hemisphere activity. So it is extremely logical. It's why when people reach that point, fatality really, there's nothing more rational to that person than taking their own life, because there is no other answer. Now, outside of it, that just seems crazy, you know, that chemically somebody that's in a better place. And it essentially comes down to the chemicals in your body that you're producing as a consequence of what you're thinking and feeling. That's the sum of it. That's what I wanted to get across into the book, because that's something we can take control of, rather than ingesting vast amounts of drugs that generally come with a warning on the outside saying this may cause suicidal thoughts. I mean, that's the craziest situation of all, isn't it?
Yeah, my friend, it was in 2008. I was over in America, and he shot himself while I was over there. He committed suicide. And that day, I still remember that day, how clear and with clarity his mind was working. It wasn't like that this guy was frantic and he was at the end of his tether. No, 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 no. This is somebody who was clear and crystal with what he was doing. It's only later that you realize, oh, he was planning this all along, you know. And just to go touch on what you were talking about with your situation, how it made you stronger. I mean, it's the same with me when my friend killed himself. It was the worst thing that's ever happened to me, even though it happened to him. And I suffered post-traumatic stress disorder and depression as a result of it. But right now, I would say I'm glad that I went through it and helped. And I know I was there and I could help the family at the time. That was a big thing. And
Yeah.
I'm you know, it's made me a better person and a more rounded person. But as you say, you know, the lockdown, the time to think, the clarity of thought. You give an example of somebody in the book who was crystal clear on that his life could not get any better, and he killed himself as a result of that. So, you know, these imbalances in the brain, they really do mess us up. And obviously with the lockdown happening and the isolation as well, it's going to be a breeding ground for depression, isn't it?
It's really, it's funny how the universe works, isn't it? You know, sort of like my Facebook memories came up today of a memory from 6 years ago. One of my fighters was fighting in Burton-on-Trent. I was just explaining to people, yeah, I run a Muay Thai boxing school as well. And the lad that came along with us had just returned from Thailand. He came out to my place, brought out a painting from Thailand, said, I want you to have this, which I was a bit taken aback with. And then said these words, you know, and you can reflect on words later to say how powerful they were. And he said, I just want to have one last fight, Garry. Well, I didn't really know what that meant. And shortly after Steve had his fight, he took his own life. So it's really pertinent today that we're talking about. And yet he was, you know, he was a total clown. He was, like I describe him as the Robin Williams of the, you know, of the whole Thai group, really, because he was just a laugh and a joke all the time. But of course, internally, that was masking what his thoughts and his feelings were. That was an attempt to overcome them.
And this is somebody who outwardly you wouldn't think was depressed. This is somebody who literally decided that his life couldn't get any better. Therefore, so he decided he was going to leave.
Yeah, yeah. Now, to you and I or anybody else generally, and you know, and that is the generalization, that may seem like how that's just stupid, but is it? You know, it's probably to that person the most logical conclusion to make. If they've been through bad times before, and this is immensely more ecstatic and joyous than what they've experienced before, then it's quite logical to think, well, Jesus, this may be downhill after this.
All downhill from here.
I don't want to go back there. You know, I want to exit at this point.
When the way I got myself out of it was you mentioned the drugs there with I'm assuming that you're not a big advocate of drugs. I've taken antidepressants, so I know what they're like, and I know how they didn't help me, and I also know the efficacy rate of them as well. Once I actually started looking and educating myself on depression, that's how I got over it. I educated myself on it. Can you explain how the current treatments for depression are just, I mean, I think they're useless, Gary. I don't know about you. Or next to it, at least.
Well, I'll try and talk positively about it. So if I take a positive stance, I would say that somebody that's desperate and needs an immediate solution, okay. But that quickly needs to be followed up by a proper solution. It's not an answer at all. So for instance, the serotonin drugs, you know,
Yeah,
the synthetic
they're,
serotonin.
they're called SSRIs, aren't they?
SSRIs, yeah. And
antidepressants.
yeah, and the problem with that is that it's the serotonin that it produced doesn't cross the brain membrane. So you don't really end up feeling good, you know, which is, it's all about how you feel at the end of the day. That's what
Yeah.
depression and anxiety is. How do we feel? And nobody teaches us how to feel. It's under an assumption that it's just from an experience and an event, and it's a sub-product of that. But that's not true. We can create them ourselves. And if we spent a little bit of time teaching kids in school, right from that stage, how to change state, how to change, and let's be honest, they do it naturally anyway, don't they? You know, a kid would be crying its eyes out and then bang, snap straight into happiness.
Oh,
Or
chocolate.
we dare interfere with, they fall out with their friends and it's like, oh, we intervene or something, but then they're best of friends in the next moment. Yeah, they know how to do it. Actually, we teach them how to forget. So the drugs, well, we can go down that route, can't we, really, about a whole pharmaceutical industry. But at the end of the day, it's like, if I can help a few, if the book can help a few, and it's not just me, you know, there are multitudes of people out there that are taking this path now. You found it yourself, you researched it yourself. But if it was more widely available, how much could we really change the world?
Yeah, we do. This is the thing. If it was more widely available, I mean, you get. I know what the situation is like in this country for somebody who one of the few people. I was one of the few people who reached out and asked for help. This is something else that they don't talk about. I mean, it's something like only about 20% of males actually who are suffering from depression actually look for any kind of help at all. So, I mean, there's going to be millions of people out there who are suffering with it in silence, especially men, I found. But the drugs that the doctors tend to just throw pills at the situation, and what they throw at the situation are SSRIs, which are selected serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And as you say, they basically stop a chemical transference across membranes in your brain, something like that. Now, they can't actually pinpoint why this has the effect on a person that it has. First of all, they can only say it makes you feel less. They can't actually tell you why. So they're giving you a drug that they know it does something, but they can't tell you why it does something. Now, as soon as I found that out, I thought, hold on a minute, that's a bit messed up, because I later found that you can change your state, as you say there, especially with regards to serotonin and endorphins, yourself, can't you? How can you do that, Gary?
There's a number of different ways, really. Let me pick out something here. So a simple one, I mentioned about left brain hemisphere activity.
And now explain,
so if you're stuck in that,
the left side of the brain, is that the analytical side, is it? Is that what they call it?
Again, it's generalizing, but pretty much so.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. You know, we have to generalize to be able to talk about the brain, because it's such a complex structure made from very simple electrical and chemical interactions. But one of the things to do, like sometimes I do it a bit covert, really, in the Thai boxing school or something. If I've worked with some schizophrenic people and people with mental health problems, or we just call them in, telling them we're going to do something physical, and I might get them marching around the room with left knee to right knee. But you can mimic that. I'm just using a bit of a stone here now, you know, by just throwing something left to right hand. As simple as that. And the only way you can do that, you have to engage. If I'm using this hand to throw it, that's right brain to left brain.
Right, okay.
So it could be marching around the room. It's very often we say, go for a walk, go for a run. Well, that's the same. You have to use left and right brain activity. So you're balancing yourself out. You're stopping that over analyzing. My mentor uses a great thing for that. Analyze ends up being anal lies. Yeah. Yeah. Ambiguity. There's a great power in ambiguity.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of overanalyzing things totally, so I'll remember that.
Yeah. So that's one simple one. I've used that a couple of times in mental hospitals when people are in a dire strait, really intent. And that's the thing that, it is the biggest killer of men under 50, more so than car crashes or anything else. And it's not that women don't attempt to commit suicide any more than men do. It's just we're more violent. That's the end of the day, and so we're more successful about it.
Yeah, it's yeah. I remember looking at the statistics surrounding it. The men are more violent, as you say, and tend to choose more methods that were, gun, etc. Whereas women tend to go the pills route. That's an over a generalization as well, of course. But you mentioned the exercise there and how to change your state. I remember years ago, somebody, I forget where it was now. I think it was a Tony Robbins course or something like that. He was talking about how you can change your state at any point. Just go to a mirror, look into a mirror and pull a funny face and start into a mirror. You instantly change the way you feel. You can feel silly. You can feel any way. That you talk about it in the book in that is the way you think leading your emotion, or is your emotion leading? I think you touched on it in the book, didn't you?
Yeah.
And you certainly touched on you think that you're the one who's breathing now, or is the earth breathing you? Can you go into a little bit of a depth about that?
I like to lead by almost like in a Socrates way, get people to think for themselves, really. And some places I've done that question in sort of like in speaking events where there are people and they may be taking a spiritual line of things or purely physical, it is academic people. But it's very, very simple. We're all taught it at school. It's about atmospheric pressures and how to link on. We do it unconsciously. It's not about oxygen in our brain. We actually measure the CO2 levels. And when that exchanges, then we breathe in. But to breathe in, we have to die a little first. That's what we call expiration, a little death. Yeah? So you let things go. You let air expel from you. And that creates a vacuum in your lungs. So it's the earth breathes you rather. Because the atmospheric pressure is less in your lungs, then it's air rushing in. You don't have to do anything. It's going to force its way in. Simple physics. Now, if we took that attitude a bit more with life, of getting rid of the shit that we don't need, the little death, and then just let things happen. The atmospheric pressure in us will change, the emotion will change, whether it's happiness, joy, ecstasy, and we don't want to be in that state all the time.
Of course not.
To change state, it's not as hard as you think. It doesn't involve going to the doctors and taking drugs or caffeine or watching television or, it doesn't involve any, or going on Facebook or, it's inside. And so simple breathing can change. Just looking up. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We produce serotonin just when we look up, particularly the right-hand side. Again, science can't definitively explain why. Who knows? In the backs of human history, it was looking up at the sun or something. Who knows? But who cares? It's the outcome I'm interested in. And if the outcome is I produce serotonin in my stomach and my brain that changes my state of feeling good, happy days, literally.
I love the way you look at very simple things. I mean, to help people with depression, because you mentioned they're looking up. You talk about this in your book, and looking up. It's an expression that has got a history. And I remember when I came through the other side of my PTSD and depression, I wrote a list of rules down that I basically live my life by now. And I won't go into it, but I will tell you the number one rule is stand up straight. And that is from depression. It really is, because what I found is depression is hard work. It's not easy, is it? You have to work at it. It's not something that you are. It's something that you almost make yourself. You make yourself have a negative thought that leads to a negative feeling, that leads to a negative action or inaction, that leads to a negative thought, and the spiral continues again. You have to work at it. And just a simple thing like standing up straight can change. It can totally change the way you feel, because if you look at a depressed person, Gary, how would you see them? How would you, they would be maybe with their shoulders hunched and looking down at their shoes and scuffing and walking along, you know. Just simply standing up straight, I found, can instantly change your state. And it's not that you're, you know, people have said, I've said this to people in the past, and they've sort of said, isn't that lying to yourself in a way? But in a way, yeah, you are. But you're only doing the same sort of thing as an antidepressant would do anyway. You're changing it. And it's simple things like that that I think we need to get back to.
I do, as for a bit of humorous state, you know, sometimes on networking events and things I've been to, and I'll do a bit of a talk. So I'll get everybody to take a stance of somebody who's depressed and looking at the floor and everything. And then I'll say, now repeat after me, Garry Jones is the best speaker in the world. Yeah. And then, no, it doesn't feel like that at all, right, does it? And then stand this way and I say, Garry Jones is the worst speaker in the world. Yeah. And that's not congruent as well in your body, because the way your body, simply the way your spine is, for instance, really is just an electrical conduit for information, as it is chemical throughout the rest of your body. And if it's pinched over, you wouldn't take electrical cables and stretch them and break them out. And what sort of response are you going to get from your computer or whatever you attached? But we do it with our bodies. There's quite a famous experiment, really, that was done in terms of two scientists that asked the question, really, does smiling make you happy, or does happiness make you smile? And they went to such lengths, there are thousands of muscles in your face, and they went to the lengths of, by electrically stimulating every one of them, being able to personally control the individual muscles in their face. That's how seriously they took this subject. But at the end of the day, what they found out is the zygotic muscles here that determine a proper smile, not a Gordon Brown smile.
Right.
Yeah. But a proper smile. Yeah. And when you do that, yes, it releases the chemicals that make you happy. But it is the same the other way around. When you feel happy, that makes you smile and release the chemicals. So whichever way you do it. So who cares about the line? Yeah. If I share a personal thing, you know, when I was a teenager, I'd play. If I started to feel down, I'd play morose music that take me further down. I had this stupid belief that if I took myself to the bottom of the well, I'd spin back out of it again.
I can feel
what
it.
A crazy, stupid strategy to take.
It was Morrissey, wasn't it? I can feel it. No, it was.
Could well have been, yeah, amongst others, yeah. Yeah, but it sells, and that's why it sells, because so many people are running that strategy.
Misery loves company, mate. It really does. In your book, you talk about a lot about ABC, and you might have seen that my channel has been a lot about the news and how the news is all fake. And I love your ABC rule, because I think it works in life. Full stop, with everything, not just in your stat. Explain what your ABC is. I would actually call it ABCD, because D is do. But explain what your ABC is, Gary.
So the A is just accept nothing.
Nothing. That's all. Even if I tell it you.
No, not even you. Not even myself.
Not even Gary.
Not even I trust myself. Yeah. So why should I trust anybody else? I can't even trust myself, because beliefs change. So accept nothing, believe nothing, and check everything. That's the really important part, because the first two just sound very cynical.
Yeah.
But the check everything is the do. That's what I would say. Okay. So as to the D, the check everything is the doing. Try it on for size. So that could be when I'm teaching martial arts, that could be a technique. And maybe your size, your fitness, your flexibility just doesn't suit you at all, but it may in the future. But for you here and now, it's rubbish. It's not a truth for you. So applying that, it just makes such relevance. I'll give you an example now. I was over the moon when I saw there's been an Amazon review going on at the moment where a guy rips me apart. Starts off with, this guy is delusional. And I thought, brilliant. That's the review I was looking for. Now, this is somebody that's gone to the whole trouble of reading the book, even though I'm delusional, right?
Yeah.
But he checked it, tried it on for size. It didn't work for him, yeah?
Brilliant.
But that means I still had an impact. Yeah. So the check everything, even, well, let's use an example of me. So, you know, as coaches and things that we're told that they come up with a mantra, if you will, earlier. And mine was about to have a positive impact on 300 million people. And then luckily for me, a very good coaching friend of mine said, what's with this positive business going? Because that's not how you do things, is it? Yeah. You do it by taking people over the edge sometimes. You do it by antagonizing, by stirring people up, and then getting them to look at it from a different viewpoint. So I've dropped that. I just want to have an impact. I don't care if it's good or bad. I'm checking everything.
Yeah.
So, sounds cynical, but it's more to stimulate people to, rather than believe what you were taught at school or you see on the news, yeah, go and dig around a bit.
Yeah, question everything, because you'll find. I mean, you mentioned in your you actually mentioned this in your book. I'm sure you do, that how we were taught at school. I know you and I were taught at school that neutrons were the smallest thing in the universe. We were taught that, and that's not the case. So you know that was untrue. So if we were to accept it and believe it, then we would be doing ourselves a disservice. So it's not a case of, you know, believe, literally, you know, believe nothing, don't believe in gravity, etc. But just check everything. And I love the way you can implement that in not just in your daily life to help with your mental state, but also to help, because these days are crazy complicated and crazy, you know, scary, quite honestly. We've got a game show host as leader of the free world. I think it's well worth people reminding themselves that history is written by the winners, and people make mistakes, and facts change.
Yeah.
What would be the one thing you think somebody with depression could do right now? The one thing, would it be to just, you know, stand up straight to try and change their state like that? What's the one thing that you could advise somebody to, you know, what with depression or PTSD, etc.?
Model somebody who's got out of it. Study how that person holds themselves. What did they do to get out of depression? That's what the answer to all of this is, really. Any issue we face.
I'll tell you this,
instead of studying people with depression, yeah, those that had it and got rid of it, yeah.
I really, when I was suffering with depression, one of the things that stopped me from getting over it quicker was I didn't talk about it to people. I'm a man. I kept it to myself. We've got pride, you know, etc. This is one of the worst things that we can do with depression, isn't it? Is to bottle it up like this and hold it in, because these feelings, they really can fester, can't they?
Happens a lot, you know. If I can use the example of martial arts, then, you know, the amount of guys that are martial artists for me, or I know through other avenues, but then we take a different route. You know, now I pride myself on confidentiality, of course, that's the only way I can work with people.
Mhm.
Having said that, once they've worked or done with me, it's putting them in the place that they can talk to others about it. But it, you know, I'll give you a very fine example. There's somebody I'm dealing with at the moment that over lockdown has just stopped for weeks, washing, stopped eating, stopped doing anything, didn't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And this person hasn't been like that before. You know, absolute brilliant martial artist in many fields and in their work as well. But that just all went out the window. You know, and they found themselves in a hole that they just couldn't get out of. There's just some simple things after that. Simple things. I'll use the ball as an example. There's been a lot talked about with the military aspect of just making your bed in the morning. You know? Because as soon as you wake up, that's something you've taken control of. That's the gist of it, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about making the bed at all. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is, but that's a good example that everybody can do. You know, if we made it a happy event to brush our teeth, well, that could be the same process, taking control of our lives. Because depression and anxiety rob us of that control.
Yeah, and when you actually do take control of your life, you say making your bed. I know it sounds silly to people who haven't suffered with depression before, but it's a real achievement to make your bed in the morning when you've been depressed. And I think you mentioned
Why should you bother?
Exactly. You know, why bother? Why bother? We're all going to die anyway, and it doesn't matter. And, you know, we're all going to end, and all of this is irrelevant. You know, I remember thinking like that myself. And whenever I caught myself feeling like it a few weeks ago, and I went in the kitchen and I cleaned out a drawer. I just really, you know, the man drawer that men have in kitchens where they got batteries and an old instruction manual for a toaster that you haven't used since 1980s. You know, I went and cleaned out a drawer. It's simple things like that I think that people need to be more aware of, and less so looking to outside sources to help them and outside sources to fix them, because your doctor's not going to fix you if you've got depression. Your doctor, you know, that they've only got certain things that they can do, and they're most likely going to push you down the route of medication and possibly some sort of secondary care. But it's going to be medication first. Whereas I certainly found that I came up with something like 7 things that I could do that you can do to really help yourself. The first one of which is your sleep. Make sure that you're going to bed at a reasonable time and getting up, etc. I know it's very difficult when you're depressed, because a lot of depressed people don't do anything. Therefore, they're not tired at night. That's what I found anyway. But it's simple acts, simple things, like cleaning out a drawer, like making your bed in the morning, that can really change the way somebody who's depressed views the world. I'm really this one of the reasons why I got you on, because I read your book and it was just so simple, the things that you teach. Exercise we touched on. What about the diet, Gary? How important is diet for your mental health?
There's been lots talked about. They tried to almost EU legislation pushed through about getting rid of vitamins and goodness knows what else to be sold through places like Holland and Barrett and that. And that's another route to go down. But simply, you know, I'd recommend to anybody, I mean, especially at the moment for immune systems. Yeah, the argument will be, if you take multivitamins and supplements, that most of it will come out in your urine or through your backside. But who gives a shit, literally? Yeah. If 10-20% of those minerals you were really lacking inside there, and we're going to take you down a route that's going to end up killing yourself, it's worth paying some money for, isn't it? Yeah. And if you can, then trying to balance it up. Who has got time to balance a diet? And if you're on lockdown, yeah, ordering it from a superstore, well, you'll get what you're given. Yeah, you'll get what's in there. You won't be able to plan meals. God bless him, Jamie Oliver, writing all these lockdown meals of like fanciful bloody Chinese ingredients and God knows what. You know, not a chance it's going to be beans on toast, isn't it? You know?
Of course.
But to be quite honest, and you know, I'm going to contradict myself in a way here now. I've been checking out, testing different ways. I don't think personally diet has as much effect as just the way you feel and think. That can override a lack of diet supplements that could help you. You know, for instance, in Germany, they will prescribe St. John's wort. You won't get that in this country, you know. It's just a different approach. But if you're feeling good anyway, that'll immediately, let's use your immune system, for instance. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, I do vitamin C. Vitamin D is great for you as well at the moment. But it's not as important as spending time to feel good. It's not as important as doing a little bit of exercise. And everybody comes up with the excuse, I haven't got time to exercise or anything. When you're depressed, you make sure you don't have time to exercise. But do some high intensity, 4 minutes. That's all. Yeah. Everybody's got 4 minutes. You can do it while you're watching the television if you want. Yeah. Or watching YouTube or
there's no
scroll. Yeah,
there's no excuse. There really isn't. One of the things that I did when this lockdown happened, well, there was 3 things that I did, to be honest. I wasn't like these people who looking at the government to tell them what to do, because I feel as if the government don't know what they're doing, and common sense needed to prevail. So the first thing I did was I started looking at my diet, and I thought, right, okay, away with the takeaways. I'm going to still eat takeaways. I'm going to learn how to cook them myself and freeze them, etc. And obviously, because of that, I'm eating less salt, sugar, etc. So obviously, I'm saving a lot of money as well. So that's something that, and I'm making better food than the takeaways. But that's just me blowing my own trumpet. Next thing I did was, right, okay, I need to get fit. And if you'd have seen me 4 months ago, you'd have looked at me and said, yeah, he looks pretty fit. But now I'm running 10Ks like they're nothing. And mentally, I'm feeling so much sharper than I've ever felt in my life, because I'm fit. And I am seeing, Gary, when I go out to my local park every single day almost, I'm going out there, more and more and more people are taking up exercise. It is so important to your mental health, isn't it?
Crucial, yeah. And how crazy it wasn't really pushed out. And now they're saying, in terms of the COVID, you know, that obesity is putting you more at risk. Well, why didn't we talk about prevention from the start? Okay, there's lots of this that we really don't know on how to deal with it. The world doesn't know. It's
got to sell Doritos, mate. They've got to sell their Doritos. That's why.
You know, and now we've got a problem with alcohol. That's a surprise, isn't it? You know, so yeah, in terms of that's something you take control of as well. You don't have to go to a gym. You don't have to attend somebody to tell you how to do it. Jesus, there's tens of thousands of pieces of video on YouTube that you can just, you know, have total access to. Never in history have we had this opportunity of just information, but neither have we had disinformation on this level in the same respect.
Which is
in the Middle Ages, we'd had priests, you know, we'd all be looking at priests, and now those priests are called scientists. but the thing is with science, the truth of science is it's a process. You know, like we talked about neurons and protons. It's not that they were wrong. It's not that everybody deliberately misinformed us. It's a process, you know. And if you ask me, we'll come back to a lot of what the priests said in the first place, but couldn't express because they didn't have the scientific equipment to measure it. But it's getting that way.
Do you see more people? You know, you say you're running a Muay Thai. Is it Muay Thai? I can never pronounce it correctly. Are you seeing an uptick in people looking after their health as a result? I mean, you know, you say You say the worst things in life can teach you or I certainly have in the past. The worst things in life have taught me the biggest lessons. I mean, this COVID has obviously, it's affected the world, and you know, are we going to come out of this healthier? Do you think? I certainly hope so.
I'll give you my straight up view. An unpolitically correct view, let's put it in that way. Say you had a young kid, really, and you've got an open fire, let's say a 3 or 4 year old child, and the child goes running towards the fire. Now, we could be politically correct and we could say, please don't do that, you know, and end up in the fire. Or we could give them a slap across the top of the head of no, yeah, and they'll still try it one more time. Or there may have to be a bigger hit. That's COVID. I'd love to believe that human nature changed big time the first time around. But look around you. Go to the superstore now. It's like nothing happened. Yeah. A simple measure outside of my place of like rubbish on the verge. It's covered again in KFC and McDonald's and just people throwing stuff out the window. We all saw how nature recovered in no time at all. A 50-year goal for bringing down pollution was achieved in a few weeks.
Yeah. This is something that they
That's
said
what
was
humans can do.
Well,
that's what we can do. But we haven't, you know, a lot of people have slipped back. And whatever you think about COVID, whether it's real or not, you know, I don't want to go down those arguments at all, because to me, actually, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's nature or constructed by man. It really doesn't matter. There's 2 words we need to do from this: adapt and act. That's all. Let's keep it simple again, really. Yeah. If we're all going to be monitored by every system going in the future and everything, well, you're not going to change that. You're not going to. So we have to adapt and work within it. And then the act, that's the bit you're asking me about. Will we change? I think it has to be a bigger slap before we change.
You know, I've had this conversation with my fiance a lot, and we both have come to the conclusion that we haven't learned our lessons. And I feel with COVID as if we hit a gigantic iceberg about 4 months ago, and we're all at the moment on the Titanic, singing and dancing, but the ship's sinking, and it's going to sink, and it's inevitable. And right now, with, you know, the people who were trying to start the economy and saying everything's going to be fantastic, you know, they're like the fiddlers, you know, they're playing the violins on the Titanic. And this ship, it's going to sink, and I don't think people have realised just how badly it's going to affect everybody. And however, you know, difficult things are at the moment, I feel as if they're going to get worse, Gary. I feel as if the next year is going to be worse for people. I don't think we're going to recover from this. We're in a V-shaped, you know, recovery, like they're saying in the media and the government. I mean, I said this on Twitter the other day to people. 10% of the people that I talk to about COVID don't believe that it's a thing, and they think it's all fake.
Yep.
The other 90%, they think they've had it. And the fault for both of these things is with the media and the government, because they've lied to us constantly all of our lives, and nobody believes them anymore. And now we're in a situation where we need to trust people, and we need to believe people, and we don't even believe the scientists, because let's face it, they're just guessing as well at this point. And I feel as if things are going to get worse. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on and talk about, you know, depression and how it's people. I do say to people, it's quite cutting. It's quite abrupt. There's only one person that can save you from depression, and that's you yourself. I truly believe that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, because I do think that things are going to get more difficult, and for a lot of people, not just in the UK, but all across the West in the coming year or two, in the coming years. It's going to get worse before it gets better, I feel.
We should probably have a conversation in a Faraday cage, really, somewhere, mate, at some point, because a lot of the stuff I talk to some people that have access to information, and yeah, there's a lot to come here. There's a lot to come here, and some of this, if we look back at history, we'll get answers. You know, all these things repeat themselves in cycles of time. Yeah, if we want to know what's going to happen next with COVID, look back to what happened with Spanish flu and the plague. Yeah, that's what virologists will do. And there is patterns that repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Again, whether it's man-made or we don't even need to go down there, because it will still take the same patterns. And these things can be predicted to time frames that will repeat again and again. It's just like sowing seeds for a harvest of corn. Yeah, we know when it's going to come out again, and it'll keep repeating. This is nature. It's simple, but we want to overcomplicate it. We're human. We're arrogant. We think we can control the world. Yeah, 12 volcanoes going off. There's a hint and a clue. We'd be in a right mess. Climate control. Yeah, we wouldn't have to worry about overheating then. We'll be straight into an ice age. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's kind of, when you do look at the world like that, you do sort of end up with the sort of view like, oh well, it's just, well, we've got now, might as well enjoy now then, because that's all we've really got, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and you know, and you know, we don't want to get depressed about thinking about it, because it's not, because you know, take control of your life.
Yeah,
take control of the environment you affect, and think about long term. Yeah. Now, will I be helping my grandchildren, yeah, throwing rubbish out of my car window, using tons of plastic? Will I be helping grandchildren taking flights left, right, and centre around the world? No. You know, I jokingly said to somebody, we're probably the group of people. Remember when we always used to moan about our granddads saying, "Oh, in my day, mate, we had it rough," and it's we'll be the granddads going, in our day, we had everything. You know, we could fly all around the world. We could buy anything cheap as chips and everything like. Yeah, because that's not necessarily how our grandchildren are going to have life ahead of them.
Yeah,
so that's why they need these tools. That's why we need to be sharing this knowledge. Yeah, so that they're better positioned to make better decisions than we ever did.
That's really good advice. That's really good advice. If somebody is listening to this and you know, somebody is depressed, and obviously, you know, we've touched on, you know, just do one thing, obviously make your bed, etc. How can, what practices can they do on like a daily basis to keep you know, motivated, and to keep their levels, I suppose, of happiness up, and to not, you know, what practices are there like any daily mantras or anything like that you suggest, or
well, let's keep it simple then.
For instance,
let's keep it to 3. I mean, if we did the meditation, I mean, I sort of like map it out in an acronym of like meditation, but you know, of course there's all sorts of connotations. People go off on that, really thinking they're going to, you know, be putting all sort of yoga poses, and that's just breathing exercises. You know, just, and don't get, well, an easy one, a really easy one, different to in the book. Then in the book I talk about 4 and 4, but this would work even more for anxious people, as well as it's just 3 and 5. Now in yogic texts and up, they'll have it all mapped out in what's called pranayama and everything, but science, this is where science can catch up and study what's actually happening. If you breathe in a shorter amount than you're breathing out, 3 and 5 is a good example. You actually spray.
How do you mean 3 and 5? Like breathing in for 3 seconds and out for 5?
Breathe in for 3 seconds, and I like to do it by saying, because everybody will do different. It'll be 1, 2, 3, or 1. Just go 1 and 2 and 3. That way it'll map it out there.
Okay.
And then act 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Now that'll have a chemical reaction in your body.
And so just concentrate on the breathing and the sort of the mantra. So
yeah, just count in your head. That'll occupy, because everybody says you should concentrate, not think of everything else. For most people, that's like an impossible journey. Just count, yeah. And if you lose count, don't get hung up about it. It's no big deal. But as soon as you do that, you'll spray a chemical over your heart that'll slow the heart rate down. So we'll do this for fighters, for instance, yeah? Just to slow the heart rate down straight away. And I certainly do it with people that are getting anxious and depressed. Because it sounds contradictory, doesn't it? But you know, when you're depressed, sometimes your heart rate's through the roof. Yeah. It's not that it's slowed down and everything at a slow pace. It can be the opposite.
Right.
So yeah, meditation. I talk about anchors. That's a few times a day. Just think of something good. Just think of something good, and do
expand on the anchors.
Okay, so that's an anchor in terms of neurolinguistic programming language. That just means a physical action that you relate back to pictures, memories, smells. Your name is an anchor, for instance. You can be in a room of 1,000 people, and if you heard your name, they might not have been talking about you, but you'll filter through everything and bang, because that's an anchor related to you, from parents, teachers, you know, all those people calling it out, and you react. You know, that's why spies have to keep their first name the same. It's a giveaway.
Have a good trip, thank you.
So anchors, you know, can just be pinching your 1 or 2 fingers together. So for instance, you know, let me give you a live example. If I'm doing hypnosis with somebody, I use an anchor on the back of my hand to take me into the change of state.
Right.
Because hypnosis is all about you go into the state first, and the other person comes with you. You don't hypnotize anybody. They come if they want to. Yeah.
Okay.
So anchors are really important. We do that, you know. Brushing your teeth is an anchor in the morning. Yeah. That you're up out of bed and you anchored it. That's the start of the day. Or it can be a cup of coffee for people, or tea, or you know, those are all anchors. What it allows you to do is re-access again. Like a good one for depression, then, for example, is a song. A song you have an association with, yeah? Bang, that'll take you back there. The most powerful ones are smells. Right, supermarkets make great money out of that. The smell of bread or the smell of coffee. And the smell of vanilla is another one as well. That gets sprayed at the front of superstores to encourage you to buy. Yeah. These are very, very powerful, but you can do your own. Why let somebody else be imposing them upon you? Do your own, so you can change state immediately.
Yeah, it's, the way I remember this from my research was there's I actually found it to be one of the better practices that the doctor and the medical people threw my way, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy. We use anchors in that. Depressed person, for instance, you know, just off the top of my head, depressed person will say they see a friend at the shop and the friend doesn't have time to say, doesn't even mention, they say hello and they don't say a hello back. You know, a depressed person might think, oh well, you know, why would they say back to say that to me? I mean, I'm useless, look at me, I look awful, I feel awful, etc., etc., etc. And those negative thoughts obviously lead down that spiral of depression and negative feelings, negative actions. And I used to use simple things just to try and catch myself whenever I would think negatively. And I would just simple things like I would think about my dog that I used to love, etc. And it would immediately bring a smile to my face. Another one was food. Strangely enough, I would think about, you know, the food that I loved, and it's immediately trying to change your mental state from one of negativity to one of positivity, and that's the key with it, I found, because it really is just negative thinking. Depression is you're constantly going from you're going from catastrophizing what about one thing to catastrophizing about another. We all know somebody who immediately, you know, if you give them any situation, they will say, oh well, you'll end up getting robbed, or you got to be careful of thieves, or you got to be careful of the rapists. They would immediately go to the worst possible scenario with that. And what I found is that especially when I was suffering from depression, the worst is that I would go to the worst, the catastrophize. I would catastrophize everything. With PTSD, it was different. It was different with PTSD. I wouldn't go to the negative thinking. It would, like with the PTSD, I would walk into, I don't know, a supermarket, for instance, and as I was walking in there, if it was a new supermarket, I would immediately look at where's the exit. I would immediately start thinking, okay, I need to exit. What if you know, a fire happens? Where will I go? And you immediately, it's almost like the PTSD was almost like a feeling of constantly being in fight or flight mode. Whereas with the depression, it was more me constantly, and I mean constantly, thinking negatively about every single subject that I was I would look at, and that in itself makes you a bloody miserable person, and nobody wants to be around you anyway because you're so miserable. It
and it's
really
self-fulfilling.
it's well, misery loves company, you know, and you try and get everybody else miserable as well. Of course, if you're the depressed person, you don't realize that you're doing it, and because you're so insular and you're so inward looking, you know, you're not aware of what's happening around you or how other people will perceive you. Just from my experience. I mean, I don't know, it's a bit of a tangent there, but you know, you were saying anchors really do help to bring you down, and just to anchor a feeling, an emotion, a smell, anything, just to, it's for when you catch yourself thinking negatively, isn't it? It's when, because that was the big thing for me. It was being able to be self-aware enough to go, yeah, I'm thinking wrong there.
Sometimes I use the example of, because really, you know, the anchor can work either way. So what you were doing was anchoring, making it worse, and re-accessing rubbish times, you know. Or you can, like somebody could, that is depressed as well, could think of their dog, and even though they go happy, and then it leaps to everybody's dead. You know, oh, I miss
wasn't the dead dog I was thinking about.
Yeah, because you know, but you've got an option. Those are two options, isn't it? Yeah. It's the same dog, same memory, but you can go take it down different pathways. If sometimes I use the example, okay, we've all got them in our car now as a GPS system. Can you imagine having a GPS system that says, you asshole, you've taken a wrong turn in again? How many effing times have I told you, you stupid idiot?
You get that.
Yeah, but that's the GPS most people, not some, most people have in their head. Yeah. You wouldn't keep a friend around that's like that.
No, I mean,
get out of my life. I can't be doing with you anymore. But we nurture them, we invite them in, we feed them, clothe them, praise them. Yeah, the one in our head, that's the one to become self-aware of. Maybe Jung would have named it his shadow and whatever. It's just a name. Yeah, it's more about what are we going to do about it instead of theorizing about things. What are you going to do about that force in your head? Are you going to put up with it anymore and accept it? Because the people that go on to become real driven entrepreneurs or people in the community, and that, they're the ones that are saying, I'm done with that voice. You know, when we talk about modeling the people that get over it, it's what's that point where this is enough. This is enough. And most of that comes down to a purpose. You know, Viktor Frankl wrote talks very well about it, that in concentration camps, the people that survived had a purpose. They had something that they could see in a future they wanted to live for. Healthy, fine people died because they just gave in. So what's the point? We're going to die. There is no point. And they would literally will themselves to death. Right? Yeah. But some people that were desperate health conditions survived. And you see it now, you see it with COVID, yeah? Again, regardless of what we think about it, there were people in hospital that were in a desperate medical state on ventilators. And some of those people, scientists, the doctors, could not explain why that person survived and this one didn't. And some, it purely comes down to my belief, my check, everything I'm researching is they really wanted to live and come out and see their family.
I know some people listening to you might think that that's a bunch of hooey, but you go and ask any doctor, any surgeon, any doctor on what is the biggest variable with regards to somebody getting over their cancer diagnosis or recovering from cancer, and they will tell you mental attitude is the number one. You know, you've it's magical, really, the way positive thinking positively can change your, not just your outlook, but your health as well. Everything. It's incredible. It's really quite magical the way your outlook and your mental outlook can just change things externally to you, isn't it?
And the opposite side of that is giving people permission to leave when they need to. You know, as humans, we talked about dogs. We keep hanging on about cruelty to animals, but the cruelty to humans that keep alive desperately.
I know.
And lots of the stuff that I've been involved, you know, my experience is that to say to somebody, it's okay to go now if you want. Yeah, it's okay, and they will rapidly and peacefully, or they'll hang on for family and in desperate pain, and so that there's an opposite side of this, you know? And we've got out of touch with that a bit as humans, haven't we, as well? About, you know, that's a depressing thing to see people kept alive in extreme pain.
Yeah, yeah, and there's no real way out for those people. I don't want to get onto that because it's a little bit too, I think, morbid.
Different subject.
We don't want to depress anybody.
So let's switch it now. Let's switch it now to another thing that is much more beneficial. And perhaps, you know, I didn't have room in the book. I was sort of like filtered down loads of stuff. I have people here, for instance. Let's use gratitude. You know, that's one of the things that's been studied a lot. A heap of scientific measurement about what effect that has on people. And it's quite, you know, it's quite subjective, a subject to start with. But I might get something like, when I've got people staying over and that really, I might get a cereal bowl and put some porridge in and say, okay, this process of thinking gratitude, because people can do it for 3 or 4 days, things that you've got, you know, that are going on good in their life, and then they start, what am I going to do next? What can I write down that's, well, take a bowl of porridge and start to think about what was involved in getting that bowl of porridge there. It can be anything, but let's just use porridge as an example. Mm-hmm. So there's harvesting. People packaged it. People worked in, hundreds of people worked in factories, delivery drivers. Somebody made the packages. Somebody did all the marketing and design. You know, sunshine. The remarkable sort of nature that even developed porridge in the first place. Then it was refined over years of agriculture. People making, you know, you could spend hours on a bowl of porridge, that maybe 30 grams of porridge that was just for you as an individual. Hundreds of events, situations and people just for that tiny bowl of porridge for you. You could write for about a year about everything involved in that if you put thinking towards it. And that's just porridge. So don't tell me you can't think of anything else to be grateful for in life.
There's plenty.
We have a whole situation, even at the moment, that everybody, you know, reporters I wouldn't want to be in government. Whatever we think of government at the moment, who would want to be in government? Because you know, as soon as you face a reporter, he's going to ask the same question again. When's lockdown going to be over? When's COVID going to be over? That's the question you asked yesterday. I'll give you the same answer as I did yesterday. I don't know. Yeah. Or we could be looking at, wow, we have a medical setup like never before. They didn't have this with the Spanish flu.
No.
Yeah. We built hospitals. We can do whatever we want to do. And again, you know, who cares about really where this has come from? This is a time, if the next, well, not if, when the next element of this comes along, what's to be grateful for? Like finding out what's really important to you, finding out about your health, finding out about time with family, how much you missed your friends. And thank God we've created a system where we can communicate with our friends regardless if I can't leave my house. I have access to people, I have access to food, to warmth, electricity, clothing. But we can alternatively concentrate on all the negative stuff and drive ourselves to. We could watch the news all day long. I live out in the sticks, but I have a neighbour, he's 80-year-old guy, and that's all he was doing. I was getting his shopping for him, and I was watching the television all day long. And God bless him, he did literally think the COVID virus was this big. You know, bless him, you know, because that's the graphics on the television, you know. Graphics were, you know, it was showing that. You know, and I guess that's quite comical in a way, but it's not, is it? Because
no,
that's the way it was affecting him.
I laugh at it, but it's you know, the whole point of my channel is I started it because our news was useless and it was broken and it was doing a rubbish job. So I decided to try and do a better job. And for the most part, I think I've done that job, to be honest, over the last 4 years. But yet they are not helping the situation. The news aren't. They like you said, there's, you know, that guy thought that the virus is that big. You laugh at it, but they're not educating people. They're on what to do, and they're also people are looking at the government and the news to tell them what to do. And I think less and less we need to do that in the future. And I think more and more we need to start actually looking at things and making our own judgments and using our own powers of deduction, our own brains to do it. Because let's face it, what they're suggesting and some of the things that they have suggested over the last few months has been ridiculous. And they change their minds on things with regard and you know, depending on what day of the week it is. It's like, oh, well, should we use masks? Oh, masks don't help. Oh, we won't use masks. And oh, we've got to use masks though. Oh, the reason that you were told we weren't using masks because you wanted them for the doctors, and the doctors and nurses didn't have enough. So you were lying to us all along, and you weren't telling us the truth. And you can see how people looking at the government, etc., are going to end up getting really depressed and worse because they obviously don't have a clue what they're doing. We have to take responsibility, I feel. And it's really good. I mentioned the amount of people I see exercising in my local park. It's really good to see, Gary, because I do hope that this disaster, this pandemic really has kick-started a few people into realizing that, yeah, we've taken an awful lot for granted, and our health is one of them. We need to sort it out, and I hope that it's going to continue. My worry is, like yourself, that we're just going to slip back into our own ways if things go well in the coming months, and I don't think they're going to anyway. I think we're going to get probably a second wave, and we're going to have to really take this serious. And
yeah.
I don't think that they're taking it serious at the moment. That's the problem. They're taking opening the economy and opening schools more serious than, well, shouldn't we stop it spreading first and maybe get a vaccine before we start opening everything up? But then they'll say, well, if we don't open everything up, then there's a point where a broken economy causes more deaths and more
Yeah.
poverty than obviously the COVID would. To which I will say, well, you know, change the frigging economy then. You know, why are we working for an invisible thing? Should we look after the people rather than look after this invisible economy that everybody says that we're slaves to? It can be really that, you know, I really hope that people, if they have listened to this and they are depressed, they realize that, you know, yeah, the world is a scary place, and yes, people haven't got a clue what they're doing in government, etc. But you know, you can change the way you feel. You can change. You can choose. I know it sounds terrible. You can choose to get yourself out of this. And
Well, we will already know that. Even the most depressed people know that. And how do you know that? Because you can make yourself worse.
yeah,
Right? So, and sometimes that's how I do with people. I'll make it worse. Yeah. Because then I prove that, well, it's a statement of proof that you did that. You just made it worse. So if you make it worse, then you can make it better, can't you? That's just simple logic. And there might be a bit of confusion. Confusion's good. Marketing uses confusion to the nth degree. When you're confused, if I said to you, love your red hair today, mate, and in your head, subconsciously going, what is he on about? Whatever I say next after that, the brain hates confusion. Whatever is said next, if it is reasonable, rational, it will accept as truth.
Okay.
And go with it.
So this is part of the. This is the neuro-linguistic programming, isn't it? This is what.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's used in marketing a lot, because you'll think, what does that got to do with? What does that advert got to do with that? And then it's why this. Yeah. You've accepted it.
That scares me. That does. The people who do NLP, Jerry, just so you know, they scare me a little bit, because I've seen Darren Brown get people to rob banks on the power of suggestion, and I happen to know that he's like an evil genius, so it does worry me.
Well, it's like anything, though, isn't it? Nothing is good or evil. This is purely my belief. Nothing is good or evil. It's how we use it. Yeah. And I have found, I check out the darker side of things. Yeah, I go and look there, because that's where the best methods are. But then flip it to use it to help people. Yeah. So even in the darkest aspects of it, governments, Darrens, yeah, you'll find methods to help yourself. Because that's the key to this. You know, I don't want anybody dependent on me or have to keep referring to the book. It's just give people, if you can give people simple tools there, and they work and they prove them by checking it, doing it, then they'll take over and take control of themselves. You know?
Yeah, the problem, of course, is that you know, people are not built like that. Generally, people are. You look at the weight loss industry. There's a huge industry around weight loss, around pills. There's never been a pill invented that will make you lose weight. But every month a new one is on the market that sells millions. Why? Because people want other things to do the work for them, and it doesn't work like that. You know, if you're depressed, you're going to have to get yourself out of it. Other people can't do it for you.
You should be selling tigers and bears, put in people's homes that are getting fit.
What are you doing next, Gary? You got your Muay Thai. Is it a gym that you run yourself? Is it that you've got?
Well, I run it from a community centre with a boxing club and a number of other martial arts. So, in fact, I'm meeting tomorrow with some of the trustees, because it's a charity. Is that we're using it as an overspill for the hospital for some of the outpatients.
Right.
So
okay.
Still aren't really back in there yet, so we've got to figure out how we're going to do that. But yeah, we've been lucky enough. I've got a massive facility there that's just great. And then, quite honestly, a lot of the techniques that I put in the book and that I do with clients and everything, that's a little bit of my testing ground. There's nothing like a full contact sport for testing some of these things out, you know, in elite athleticism and that, where they work or they don't, and you know, you haven't got much time to
Yeah, I
ponder
remember,
things. You know?
I remember you said something in the book about when somebody gets a good smack in the mouth in a Muay Thai session, if the person who does the smacking apologizes, you go a little bit nuts on them, because there's no way they should be apologizing when the whole point is for them to hit somebody in the face. See, I like boxing. I've taken up boxing over the last few months, and I've just pads, you know. I don't. The problem with Muay Thai or boxing that I would have is that I don't like getting smacked in the mouth. So I don't think I'd be able to do it. But I do see how it can really help people with their mental health. Any sort of exercise would, but combat sport especially.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about the not saying sorry is that you've robbed that person of the lesson.
Yeah.
You know, so if they've come to learn to defend and stop that happening, you know, if that's, I've hit you and then I go, oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah. Well, then that means somebody else will have to hit you next week and the week after that and the week after that. And it'll keep repeating until you go, actually, it's my responsibility to stop this punch hitting me and see it coming and learn how do I adjust, how I develop my perception. That's your responsibility. But I've taken that responsibility away if I say sorry. Yeah. But likewise, I reverse that as well to say, you know, if I get punched in the face by somebody, I've got to say thank you, because I've just had a beautiful lesson from that person. Yeah.
Should we be saying thank you to COVID for coming along then? Because obviously there were going to be more COVIDs. I don't think we're done with this one yet, but this is the third coronavirus outbreak we've had this century. We're going to have more. The ice caps are melting, which means all the disease down underneath there is going to come out, which means we're going to have more. Shouldn't we be thanking COVID then, if that's the case, for it's coming along, for teaching us some valuable lessons that we're going to need to learn in the coming years?
Well, I would say if we don't, then we're forced to a position where it will be. It'll just get worse. It'll be another punch in the face and another one until we say thank you. Yeah. Until we recognize what's the good things in it. I mean, one that could create depression, but is also, I think, is just a great thing. Businesses were not going to do working from home. They really were not going down that route. All the facilities, all of the technology, everything is there to allow people. I'll use an example. It's a great stir. My sister works for the NHS. She thought she had symptoms in March. She phoned in to say, I think I've got symptoms. I can do everything from home. Get your ass in here. 30 people end up testing positive. One has a heart attack and a stroke from it. Yeah. Yes, controversial. Even the unit that we all love and is there to protect us can damage its own people. This is, whether it's in isolation or not, I don't know. But working from home, COVID's driven a lot of that. There'll be a lot less traffic on the road, a lot less pollution. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is we need the tools then to manage if we're not socializing, you know, and then there's been some brilliant studies on this as well. There's some brilliant studies in South Korea of people working from home, and some chose not to. Some said, no, I cannot do it. I need the socialization of an office. But the efficiencies went through the roof. Everybody thought they're working from home. Oh God, they're just going to be the demons of constantly making cups of tea, distractions, television, sat down. Oh, I don't have to work. I won't. No, the opposite happened. There was an 80% increase in efficiency. Phenomenal. But it's not necessarily sustainable unless you build in opportunities for people to socialize, not just Zoom calls altogether, because then, you know, those that hog the limelight, and not everybody gets a chance to chat. So we can do this. There's vast improvements. We all saw how the skies were. Yeah. The quietness, silence. Paris now. There's great protest about scooters and loud exhausts because they experienced what Paris could be like in silence.
It was beautiful. It was every day. The sun was shining outside. Every day I opened my eyes and it was like do 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 do. It was, you know, morning has broken. It was beautiful, and you could hear the birds in the morning. And now obviously things are open up. We're back to the cars and the pollution, etc. And you know, I think maybe we haven't learned our lesson, but we will.
It's a journey.
We
It's a
will.
process. Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything that we touched on a lot? And I know I have a very weird way of doing things, and I'm obviously still learning how to do this. Just to, you know, sit down and talk to people in a long form conversation, because I feel as if we get so much more out of a conversation when we do that, rather than just a 5-minute conversation that they do on the news at the moment. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't covered while I've got you?
Let's just do one last thing then. A very easy way to stop that. We talked about the chatter in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So in checking things out, even if you're watching the news or listening to somebody, now the reality is nobody taught us how to listen properly. Everybody says actively listen, passive listening, all this. Well, where's the how? And I talk a little bit about this. See, I get riled. Nothing annoys me more than not knowing something. And my beautiful wife knows that beautifully. She has an absolute skill of asking me questions I don't know the answers to. And that really, one of those is, and you see it with many people, yeah, when I'm really concentrating, well, I learned not to in martial arts, I put my tongue out.
Yeah, I do that. I bite my tongue. So it looks like my tongue's coming out.
So I started to do some research on it because I didn't know the answer. She said, why do people do that? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, so I've got to know. And the only real science research I could find was about the amount of sensors on our tongue, and it's reducing the amount of information that we're taking in.
Right.
So it allows us to concentrate more because the filter has come in and reduced. But when you're looking for something, you will find it, negative or positive. The universe has a funny way of doing that. So a good friend of mine, Jeff Rolls, that I went to see and chat over a few things, and he said, I'm meant to share this technique with you, Garry, and this is the one we're going to talk about. So in the Middle Ages, they had a contraption called the mother-in-law's tongue. That was a metal contraption that was used instead of the stocks, and it would compress the tongue for anybody that had been gossiping or whatever they decide.
Right.
Sometimes our ancestors knew a bit more than we knew now, or know now. If you put your tongue, as I'm speaking to you now, just put your tongue behind the back of your teeth. Imagine there's a ball of olive oil there. If you press too hard, you'll burst it, but if you take your tongue away, it'll burst also. And as soon as you do that, the chatter will start to reduce in your head. You'll notice my body language, the tone of my voice, much more. Suddenly, you are actively listening properly to what I say. So if you begin that habit when you're listening to somebody, it reduces the chance of interjecting, letting them speak properly. Something Joe Rogan does, I think, immensely well in his podcast. He goes quiet for a long time. He lets the person finish what they want to say. And then we'll come in after. He'll make the mental notes. So I want to bring that up from that point. Now, what's the science behind this? What's really happening? When we speak in our head, our tongue continues to speak as well.
Right.
Our tongue is too big for our mouth, literally. And when you're thinking, the tongue, ever so imperceptibly almost, is moving, it's speaking. So remember what I said about, does a smile make you happy? Does happy make you smile? Well, if you stop the tongue moving, you stop so much thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then you are listening instead of thinking and some noise passing by you that you're just waiting to jump in and say the piece that's cracking on in your head and nagging away and says, this has to be said. Yeah. So that, as a last technique, why would that help you when you're depressed? Well, you said it yourself before. When you're really, really depressed, nothing else in the world matters. People kill themselves with beautiful daughters, with beautiful spouses, with beautiful family. It's not that they don't care. It's at that time, nothing matters. Nothing else matters. So we can stop being a little less insular by stopping that voice that takes over in our head and listening to birds in the trees, to nature, to the subtle sounds that really mean life.
Good advice. It's advice I'll certainly be taking, especially on while I do this podcast, because listening and not interjecting is something that I'm really, really bad at, and as you found out, and I'm trying my best. Garry Jones, thanks very much. Get his book, A Life Without Fear. I really suggest it. It's great. There's some great tools in there. Thanks very much, Garry. Please come back. Love to talk to you again.
Fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity. Brilliant.